I neglected to show you this on the video with accessory organs, but I just want you to notice that we were talking about the pancreas, putting pancreatic juice with bicarbonate and digestive enzymes into the small intestine, as well as the gallbladder making bile to help us digest fats. That also goes into the small intestine. See how those, the bile duct and the pancreatic duct kind of come together, and they both release these into the small intestine. So you can see how all that comes together, and see how the gallbladder is attached to the liver. The bile's made in the liver from old red blood cells. It's stored in the gallbladder. So let's go away from the accessory organs and finish talking about the gastrointestinal tract. Let's see, we went from the mouth to the pharynx to the esophagus to the stomach to the small intestine, and now we have the large intestine. And notice how this large intestine is laid out. It's larger in diameter than the small intestine. It's a little more than 3 feet long, shorter than the small intestine. And the most of the large intestine, you might hear the word calling it the colon. So the colon's just another word for the large intestine. And you're going to notice that a couple other parts on there. So here's the small intestine coming in. They took the small intestine out of this picture. Remember, we've got all these 15 feet of small intestine in here. And then they come into the side right here of the large intestine. So right here is a small intestine on your body. That's going to be the lower in your lower right side of your abdominal cavity. So right here is the beginning of the large intestine. And see, it's kind of a sac. It kind of has a dead end right there. And that's called the cecum. The cecum is the beginning of the large intestine. You also see the appendix there. And the appendix is kind of hanging off the end of the large intestine. Now, there's been some debate over the years of like, why the heck do we have that? Some animals don't even have an appendix. Why do we have an appendix? And we all know about our appendix because some people will get an infection in there and need to have it removed. Well, the going idea now, scientists are pretty confident that the appendix really remains because it's a place where bacteria can be stored. Our large intestine has a tremendous amount of bacteria in it. And if you get diarrhea, for example, or somehow, usually diarrhea or some other gastrointestinal disorder that your intestines are kind of clearing out, the appendix has some good bacteria in there that can be used to repopulate the colon. So, and you can find your appendix if you put your finger on the point of your hip on the right side, called the iliac crest, but the point of your hip and your belly button, and go halfway in between there, that's where you're going to find your appendix. So the colon, or the large intestine, absorbs water from the feces. So here we've got all this digested food, all this food that's been digested in the small intestine. All the nutrients have been removed from the small intestine, are in the blood now. So what have you got left? You've got watery stuff that can't be digested. So that goes into the large intestine, and the large intestine is going to absorb water. It's going to take the water from this chyme that's going through the small intestine. Remember, the small intestine, the stuff in there looks like vomit. Okay, it's really watery. That's going to go into the large intestine, and water is going to be absorbed through the walls of the large intestine into the blood supply. So it says the colon, or the large intestine, absorbs water from feces, compacts and stores the feces in preparation for defecation. So as the feces move through the large intestine, they're going to get drier and drier, and that's going to be the food that not the food, but the materials that cannot be digested by our digestive system. And so if you get like diarrhea, for example, it's really watery, and that's because it's moving through here too fast, and it doesn't have time for the water to be sucked out of it. Okay, so there's no digestion going on in here. We're just taking water from the materials inside the large intestine and transferring that to the blood supply. You're absorbing water. There's no digestion in the large intestine. There's no absorption of nutrients. That all happened in the small intestine. There's just absorption of water. And when I say absorption, I mean moving from the digestive tract into the blood supply. A few of the vitamins, there's a few vitamins that are made by the bacteria in the large intestine. And I guess I don't put it on here. Oh, I do put it on there. Okay, we'll come back to talking about bacteria. But there are some vitamins that are actually made by bacteria in the large intestine, and they can be absorbed. But the vast majority of nutrients are absorbed through the small intestine. We also have peristalsis. So the intestines are going to rhythmically contract and move that material from the beginning, from the cecum down to the anus. So if you're looking on your own body, the cecum starts in your lower right corner of your abdomen. It goes up superiorly, the ascending colon, and you don't have to know these names, but this is the direction it goes. Everybody's goes the same way. Ascending colon, it goes across your body, your transverse colon, and then it goes down inferiorly, descending colon, back to the center where you have the rectum and the anus. And peristalsis moves that. And we've all felt that. We've felt feces moving through our digestive tract with those kind of cramping kind of movements sometimes. That's the peristalsis. The muscle at the end is, the last few inches of the large intestine are the rectum, and the rectum is where the feces are stored. And they can be stored there because we have our last of the sphincter muscles I'm going to mention, the anus. The anus is composed of sphincter muscles, again, muscles that close a tube to prevent feces from leaving the body before you're ready. Notice that there's an internal sphincter, so there's a muscle, and then there's an external sphincter. There's an internal on the inside, an external on the outside. When children are being trained, potty trained, what they're doing is they're training their external anal sphincter. The internal sphincter will stay contracted until there gets to be enough feces, get some feces in here. The internal sphincter will open. But once you're potty trained, you're able to keep your external sphincter under conscious control. You can keep it contracted until you're ready to go to the bathroom, and then the external sphincter will open. So a child, before they're potty trained, have no control over this external sphincter. The internal sphincter opens when there's feces in the rectum, and the external sphincter says, yeah, let's go, and it all just comes out. But the process of potty training means the child is gaining control over this external sphincter. So it's partially due to the development of the nervous system that allows this external sphincter to be controlled, usually at about 2 or 3, 2.5, 3 years old. So we have an internal sphincter that is involuntary. It opens when the rectum's full of feces, and the external sphincter can be controlled voluntary. And then so both of these muscles make up this end of the intestine that we call the anus. Just wanted to talk a little bit about feces. Feces are 3/4 water and 1/4 solid. So these are solid waste that we are unable to digest. So that's what's going through. We talked about fiber. So a lot of the fiber, the undigestible plant material, makes up these feces. But it turns out that when you look at feces, it turns out that a lot of it is bacteria. The colon, the large intestine, is the part of our body that contains the most bacteria in our entire body. So there's a lot of bacteria and fiber that make up this solid waste. And the bacteria can actually digest some of this undigestible material. And, but just, certain things. But like I said, most of our digestion occurs in our small intestine. We get a little bit of bacterial digestion in the bacteria can use some of those waste products for food. So you feed the bacteria as they go through there. The waste products of these bacteria doing this digestion gives feces that odor, and also is what gives us gas. So any gases that we make in our intestines are from bacterial digestion in our large intestine. I have put that there. I think I mentioned this already. The breakdown products of hemoglobin which makes the bile, causes that brown color in feces. So if you look at the solid waste, the solid part of the feces, they're really about half bacteria and half of this dietary fiber, things we can't digest. So if I just backed up as far as the functions of the large intestine, you're primarily absorbing water, preparing the waste products for defecation. Last thing I wanted to mention has to do with the large intestine, and it has to do with diarrhea and constipation. And so here's a picture where they're showing you, here's intestines where it's kind of all, the food's kind of all backed up. You shouldn't have this much food in your intestines, these dark areas with being filled up. And that person is constipated. So we have two things that are going on. We have diarrhea and constipation. Diarrhea means our peristalsis is too vigorous. We're having too much contraction of the large intestine, and small intestines can be involved. But you'll get the failure to absorb water from the feces, and this can happen due to an infection. Some people get diarrhea from being nervous, so that causes the nervous system to overstimulate the large intestines, and it causes the feces to come out too watery. They don't spend enough time in the large intestine and it comes out too watery. Infections can cause diarrhea or very watery feces. It's a defense mechanism. It gets at these possible toxic compounds out of our body faster. So diarrhea is when our feces are too watery. Constipation is when our feces are too dry, and that's what they're showing you in this picture. And a lot of what causes constipation are you don't drink enough water. Another thing that can happen, and it's really common, is not defecating. So I've heard of situations with little kids that are potty training, and they're afraid to poop on the potty, and so they hold it. And what happens? Those feces stay in your large intestine. What's the job of the large intestine? To absorb water. So the feces get drier and drier and harder, and the person becomes constipated. So some little kids can have this problem because of they're learning to be potty trained. A lot of us don't drink enough water, or we're at work and we just don't take the time to go to the bathroom, and you can become constipated just by waiting to defecate. So another thing with constipation is not having enough fiber in your diet. That can cause it too. So diarrhea is not when the food doesn't spend enough time in the large intestine for various reasons and it goes through too fast and it's too watery. Constipation is when it stays in the intestines too long and the feces are too hard and it becomes hard to defecate. So that's the end of the digestive tract, literally.